Hey guys, welcome to the Neglected Podcast. This podcast is not to change your mind, but to invite you into somebody else's narrative. This is a podcast to give a voice to the neglected. It is also an opportunity for all of us to engage.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Neglected Podcast. We are here at City Church. As always, I've got my producer, Quinn. What's going on, Quinn? Say hey.
What up, what up?
And we have a very special guest, Quinn, today. I think you know him very well. His name is Jim. I think you've met him before, Jim Simpson. And welcome. You are actually, what is your relation to this location?
I'm trying to think of some really cool sci-fi overruler kind of title to go with it, but I guess in earthly terms, I would be the pastor.
That's right. You are the man. You're the one in charge of here, and we wanted to bring you on because you've got some really interesting things, I think.
So the studio was a vision of mine that I've really fought for several years now, and people who are around me know I'm always talking about the fact that that creating content is like so important for believers right now. When I am doing missions around the world, I see everywhere I go this, just like in America,
at the phone all the time.
They're just looking at the phone, and if we can be creating content, we can get into the places of the world that, have been really difficult to physically get into. And so it doesn't all have to be a Bible study. Just have good people make good content.
Which hopefully we're trying to do here.
Yeah,
and very
no doubt.
quick story short, I've said it a few times where I had no interest in doing a podcast, but then you end up having a conversation with somebody, the right place at the right time, which one of those was with you. We went get coffee and we're just catching up, talking about life and what was going on, what I was doing work-wise, what you had going on. And you were mentioning that of, hey, podcasts, and we do a lot of content, and what do you think? I don't even know what you actually asked.
I just told you that we have a resource available, and we want it to be bigger than, the people that would even just attend our, local church. We want it to be accessible to other people. And so I was telling you, if you ever had interest or if you knew anybody, we'd love to try to.
Which was insane because I just had previous conversations a couple weeks before with friends. They were talking about podcasts. And I was like, I don't really listen to that many. I don't want to do one. If I did one, here's what it'll be. Call it The Neglected. These are the type of people I'd interview, how they've been hurt and neglected in their life. Told that to you, not thinking anything of it. And you're like, well, why don't you go talk to Quinn? We'd love to have you do it. I'm like, dude, it's just a thought. I just blurted out. And now you're kind of putting my feet to the fire like, hey, man, this could actually happen. And it blew my mind. I was like, really?
Yeah.
And come over here, talk with Quinn. He's like, yeah. Let's produce it. And it just snowballed very quickly. And here we go. But I want to thank you because it's not something you had to do. It's not something you had to open the doors to. And you also didn't put a lot of red tape on myself or what we're trying to do here and say, hey, this needs to fit in with the vision of the church and needs to be approved, your content, what we're doing.
Right.
You just trusted me enough to say, I understand your heart and what you're trying to do. And let's go. We have the same heart. Let's reach people that are in our community that are hurting, and this is a unique way to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Part of one of my big passions in life, probably my biggest passion, anybody who spends any time around me, are my kids. I really take being a dad very seriously. Spend a lot of time, not in the sense of like I always meet people who are like, oh man, I pray for my kids, or, plead the blood over my kids, but like I'm always praying, like, God, like, how can I be a great dad? Like I want you to protect them, but help me, not be the conversation piece in a counseling office one day, for my kids, where they're sitting there blaming all their, hurt on their dad. And so trying to help them learn how to be in the world, but not of the world. And in the process of that, all four of my kids they're feeding on this stuff all the time. And it's so important to me that content exists that I don't have to micromanage because, inevitably something, some podcaster playing video games is, going to say something that I'm going to have to go to one of them and go, hey, you can't watch this one anymore because, that was racist, or that was, derogatory, or, and thankfully we have found some communities that are good for them, but I'd like to be a part of helping to create another branch on that tree of fun, doesn't have to be religious content made by people who are good people and want good for the world.
Yeah, I was telling a couple people this past week that my kids like listening to the podcast in the car on the way to school, and we were listening to Theos, who is my friend from Rwanda, and he escaped the genocide. He was our second episode. And my 3 boys are in the car, especially my 2 older ones. My middle one is 8. And so Theo is explaining how he had to survive genocide at 8 years old with him and his mom and his sibling on the run, and everything that he saw and went through. My 8-year-old's listening to that when that happened to him at 8, and just how his life is trying to be given back to other people and how he worked through that. And I didn't realize how powerful that was going to be for him, but he really enjoyed it. It churned something in his heart and his mind to start asking different questions and seeing the world a little bit differently, what other people go through. So
I don't think that the answer is, to protect our kids from technology or tell our kids they can't engage in any of the, anything that's happening in the world. The thing is to make sure that we guard, what's being we filter what's going in to their minds and their hearts, but we teach them also in the process how to do that. So yeah, man. Getting them to tap into a resource like that and watching the impact it has, it's huge.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Well, speaking of children, I'd love to get a little glimpse quickly of your childhood, and because I'd like to talk about your kids a little bit here, but what was that like for you? Because there's a couple topics I want to cover, but what's your family background, where you came from, what your family dynamic was? Well,
I was thinking about this because I knew that this would be a conversation point, and some of that it's complicated because one of the things you don't ever want to do is you don't honor your mom and dad by embarrassing your mom and dad, and I do have a good relationship with my mom and dad right now, and I did not know for the longest time. My brother kind of ratted her out, but I found out my mom was streaming the services every Sunday and not telling anybody. They live in Alabama, and my brother was like, yeah, Mom's watching you preach every Sunday. And I was like, oh, it made me think about what I was even saying, but yeah, I think I've always been a little bit of an outsider. It really is not the same today just because I have found a community of people who think like I think. But as a kid, I did not care about sports. I was that kid on the baseball field stuffing dirt in my pockets and spinning in the outfield. I didn't care about it. I don't know what was the reason for that. I'm going to say my biological mother had made a decision to have an affair, and she got pregnant and left my dad. And my dad was in the Air Force at the time, and they gave him a family hardship discharge. I don't know if that's the exact title, but it's not the same as a dishonorable discharge or an honorable discharge. Okay. It's something that's a little bit different. And because she basically just left me and my sister with my dad, and kind of bounced in and out for a couple of years, and we ended up moving so I was born in Wyoming, and we ended up moving from there back to my dad's home state and living with my grandmother and in Alabama. And I remember being a little kid. My dad worked for the Social Security office there, and we just didn't have much. I remember one of the earliest memories I actually have. I don't remember anything in Wyoming, but I remember my dad. Easter was coming up. He always kept us in church, and my dad going and picking up a pair of shoes at the thrift store for me. They were a brand called Buster Brown, I think.
Sounds sweet.
Yeah, and I remember him coming home and spending an hour, like just at the table, just like polishing them and trying to make them look new. And had felt a lot of pride wearing those on Sunday because my dad had done that. And then my dad met somebody and they got married, and she jumped through all the hoops to adopt us. And somewhere in there, I was 6, and my biological mother didn't even bother to show up to the court hearings. And I made a decision. I just, I needed to have a mom. And I remember telling my biological mom that I didn't want to see her anymore, and I needed to give my stepmom the opportunity to be mom. And
you said that at like 6 years old?
Yeah, I did.
Wow.
And it was the last time I saw her.
Really?
Yeah, she didn't contest it or fight it. And so when I talk about my mom, I'm talking about the woman who adopted me and has been my mom now for all those years. So
wow, that's
a little bit emotional. So
yeah, I bet, man. That's hard to.
I've always been that guy though. Like, somebody wants to throw a stone at me and be angry. Okay, I'm done. I move on. Drives my wife crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I'll fight for somebody, but at the point that it's like this is just not doing anything, I'm really able to go and make those decisions. I've always been able to say, I need to do this.
And you think it's from kind of what you had to do
I
at
guess,
that age?
probably.
It's like you had to put a wall up on someone you love the most. And
my sister looked her up. That's probably been 10 years ago now. And she asked me if my biological mother, if I wanted to meet her, that she was going to come to my sister's house. Even then I was like, no. I got kids. They've got a grandmother, and I get emotional. I'm trying not to cry.
No, you're good. I would love to know
I just think like that. I just think I think in terms of like, why would I add confusion to my own kid's life? Not just add confusion to my life. And it'd be different. Like if that, if that woman showed up and was like, hey, like I'm repentant, I want redemption, like we'd have a different conversation, but I'm not chasing it. That's not my responsibility. And, I don't lose sleep over that. So, yeah. So
I'd love to know how that experience affected kind of my next question or line of questioning, because one of the big reasons to have you on here too is just to talk about a topic that we haven't really gone into yet, which is bullying, and just your experiences with that. And so first kind of what happened, then we'll get into like how that manifested in your life.
It's funny when we watch TV or movies and there's a bully, some of it sometimes is, super not real. But there are a lot of times where it's like, man, they're nailing it. And I'll tell my kids, I'm like, that is exactly what people used to say to me. They can't imagine that, I mean, they probably don't think I'm the coolest and hippest guy ever, but, we're pretty social family, people at the house all the time. Like they could not imagine that, I would go into a cafeteria and everybody would get up and leave the table. Just, I wore glasses. They called me Four Eyes. I was overweight. They used to, in first grade, this guy started this, and I remember his name. I won't call him out. But I did look him up online recently and had some vindication. He's a bald, overweight used car salesman. So, I told my wife, I was like, yeah, well, I guess if the tropes are true on one end, they're true on the other end. But he used to run around and act like he was holding a can in his hand and say, save the whale, from Free Willy, but tell everybody I was the whale. So
it's pretty brutal.
It was brutal. And
this is happening about the same time as you're dealing with moving on from your mom.
Yeah.
So kind of mentally, emotionally, that's got to be just messing you up, whether you realize how much it is or not.
Yeah. And my testimony, I've never really run far from God. I never drank, did drugs, any of that stuff. I really was in my heart, I've always been a pretty, not perfect, I've had my errors, but I've been pretty straight and narrow. I'm not I don't really have that testimony, but I had, unfortunately, I had teachers throughout elementary school who I don't know what it is, why a teacher would be influenced by the cool kids. That was my experience every single year. The kids that were cool, they had sway with the teacher, and anytime anything went wrong, those kids would say, hey, Jim did it, and I didn't, So on top of being bullied, I got notes sent home all the time. I tried to tell my mom and dad, I didn't do it. I wasn't talking. I wasn't doing that. I didn't do this. And of course, rightfully so, I would guess, the teacher said you did. So, so on top of that, I had a real hefty disciplinary upbringing. So I got grounded a lot, spanking, stuff like that.
Like, what was the process of how you were dealing through that stuff through elementary school, and then maybe when obviously you're going through puberty and then transitions from middle school to high school, you're still dealing with bullying and feeling stuff, because you also deal with feelings differently when you're in elementary school than you do high school. Sometimes you either lash out or you internalize it, you shut down. Like, what was going on with you?
Well, I had made a decision really young to serve Christ. In fact, I remember doing that 5 years old, and with my dad, and I remember where I was. And so coming into middle school, I was really involved in a youth group. I wasn't, it wasn't like it was different at church. I was picked on at church too. I remember just stupid stuff being made fun of, again, for things like glasses or the clothes I wore or whatever. And it was always a certain group of kids. It wasn't like everybody made fun of me, but it was always a group of kids you wanted to, like you. And then I got to 7th grade, and you had this where I was, you had a number of elementary schools that dumped into a middle school. Mm-hmm. So the pool, it went from a pond to a lake, and so it kind of gave me a little bit of a fresh start. But it that's where it moved to violence, and people wanting to fight me all the time. And 7th grade, I won't even say I got into fights. I just got beat up. One kid who was I think he was 16 years old in the 7th grade or something stupid, he didn't like me, and he just started wailing on me one day, and I couldn't defend myself, and I was still a chunky kid, and it was tough. I've never been someone that's dealt with depression, so I never had depression. I never felt sad, but I think I felt anxiety. It was like, I really just don't want to go to this place today, but oh well, I got to go. And I just always did. But in that summer, between 7th and 8th grade, I think puberty definitely starting to hit. And I was late to that too. That was another problem for me. I did not have an interest in dating. I've always been like a sci-fi comic book nerd. So, 7th grade, where a lot of kids were trying to have boyfriends and girlfriends, I was drawing Wolverine and, Darth Vader in art class. I wasn't the only one doing that, but I just, there just weren't a lot of us. And I also wasn't social with kids from school. So, basically both my mom and dad worked. So, I went to school and went home. I didn't see the kids any other time. And a lot of those kids did see each other in other activities. So there were some tighter bonds there. But between 7th and 8th grade, I shot up, slimmed down, and a lot of kids didn't recognize me. And everything kind of changed there in the sense of how the bullying went. In that year, I met Carmen, who would become my wife, at church. And I kind of lived two lives. My church life, where I really strived to be, a servant and helping out. And then at school, I was on the defense. And I remember the first time somebody tried to come up and pick a fight with me, and in 8th grade, and I'd already had a number of them before, and I was able to defend myself because I had, grown up so much, physically. And, they were like, people were shocked, because I had just taken so many punches,
You're like Spider-Man when he gets the stuff.
Well, not quite. I also
getting closer. Sorry.
Yeah, I also. This is funny. So I mean, again, everybody else is watching football, and I'm like diving into like nerd culture, movies, And so I had watched Lethal Weapon, and one of the classic Mel Gibson moves, was to headbutt somebody. You know what I'm saying? And I had gotten into a fight, and this guy, and never once ever did I pick a fight. But if you're being attacked, you would defend yourself. So, and that's the truth. All of these years, I was never the one that was starting the fight, but these fights would happen. And this one kid jumped on my back, and I remember thinking, "Oh man, that works for Mel Gibson." And I headbutted him from behind.
Ooh, that hurts.
It hurt him really bad. I broke his nose, but I don't think I could see straight for 2 days. It hurt me just as bad as it did him. It was painful. But yeah, I also, in that, I just, it's kind of a joke with my kids. I told them I learned to not fight fair. And so
you gotta do what you gotta
I
do.
went for the cheap shots to disable them and walk away. It's funny now, but that happened all the way up to my senior year.
Oh my goodness. Did you understand why it was happening?
No.
See, that's the hard thing to even think about. It's like, you've got that stuff going on and you don't really get it. You know what I mean? You can explain it now to me. And after being through high school, you're like, okay, you add this, this, and this.
Yep.
And it makes people uncomfortable, and it's an easy target, and somebody's trying to, all of a sudden you get a reputation, you start something, and then like now you're that guy.
Yep.
Right. And you can't get out of it. And I'm also interested just about, because your father was in the military too, right?
Yep. Yeah. Well,
so what was what was he telling you, or did you share a lot of this with your parents? Are they getting information from the school, or like how are they trying to help, or what are they telling you through all this?
Up until I think 7th grade, they just thought I was a bad kid. They just thought I misbehaved. Then they began to realize, well, maybe he just is talkative. I don't know. That kind of dropped as I got into junior high and high school. As far as the fights and stuff and being picked on, I don't think they understood that's what was happening. I think that they just thought that it's just kids getting into a tussle, whatever. It's one thing to go, oh yeah, he got into 2 or 3 fights this year. That happens. But if there were only 8 fights in the school and 3 of them involved your son, so what's the common denominator going on, especially if he's not starting them? Now I look back and I'm like, yeah, there were a number of fights, but I was in the midst of so many of them. And kids just hated me. They just hated me.
That's tough, man.
They were just mean. I started dating Carmen when I was 16, and she didn't go to my school and didn't know anybody at my school, but people knew I had a girlfriend, and they made fun of her just because she dated me. And she never knew any of that or saw any of that, because it was really 2 separate worlds. It was a 30-minute drive to get to church, so she lived in just like a totally different area, So she had no idea, but I'd go to school and, you know, they'd be calling her names just because they knew her name. And I carried my Bible with me on top of all of that. And I was called Bible Thumper and, you know, all types of.
Just never stopped.
It just never stopped. It never stopped. So graduated and don't have a single friend from high school that I keep up with. So don't feel sorry for me though, because
No, I mean, you're living the high life right now, so I'm not going to feel sorry for you.
Yeah, I don't have any regrets. I again, very intentional about parenting my kids, not having to walk through those things.
But even as an adult, maybe even now, I mean, it's hard to just turn off a switch. You know what I mean? Like even as a 6-year-old, if you're telling yourself like, I don't want to see my biological mom ever again, and that's it, I'm putting that wall up. It doesn't mean there aren't feelings or things that come up over the course of time, which like you might even feel now when you think about it, or especially with the bullying is, I know it's not happening anymore, but something can trigger even how I felt then when I see something now or somebody says something, and it's affecting me as an adult, as a husband, as a father, as a pastor, where, man, that's getting me away from who I am because of all of what I dealt with even then.
I think to be really transparent, probably something I don't talk about a lot is, you know, most of that's in private. My wife, she knows, you know. Gosh, I did not want to come on here and get upset. Yeah, I mean, I get pretty emotional thinking about it, especially when it's really hard for me as a pastor when if I do something that lets somebody down and it's like all out war on me. It's like, why are you doing that? Mm-hmm. It's like, there's nothing in my heart that, you know, was trying to do something wrong or whatever, but you can't convince people of that. Yeah. So, you know, there's no doubt, you know, and sometimes I'll have dreams, you know, that'll make me think about it. You know, I say with a lot of confidence the decision I made about my mother, you know, about that position. Am I trying to argue? You know, somebody that has a different tool set might listen to this and say, Jim, that was the wrong thing, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if it's the right thing or the wrong thing. I'm just telling you, it's just how I was wired. It's, you know, it's the way I was, my defense mechanism. I mean, you know, okay, you don't like me? Cool. I'll see you later, you know, or you're not going to sit here and fight for me. I certainly don't have anything to bring to the table to fight for you. And that hasn't changed. Yeah. I mean, that hasn't changed. It's hard.
That's a really hard thing, if I may speak for you, on behalf of you, and as a pastor too, because I was a pastor for 10 years in the church, and I see that being a really hard thing, what you went through, where you're the only one kind of standing up and fighting for yourself, not understanding why people are even viewing you this way. Yeah. And then when you become a pastor, same reason why you let us do this podcast, because you know there's hurting people out there that don't have a voice.
Right.
And you want to be for them, whether they ever come into your church doors or not, or believe what you believe. You know, it's part of your faith to care for them, regardless of who they are, what they've done, what their point of view is, all that kind of stuff. And for someone like you to care for people, you put all of yourself out there. You care for people spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, all these things. But I also know you end up getting hurt a lot, and people say things about you, or you didn't do the one thing they thought you should do. And then all of a sudden they put up a wall, or they're gone. And now they're, you know, not appreciative of anything that you were trying to give everything you had to them. And I felt that pain before, but I didn't go through all that bullying. So to me, that would be really hard to have that same feeling from people you're really trying to care for, and have it kind of remind you of when people didn't care for you at all.
It's really tough with especially young guys. I think like if I had to say, hey, what you know, like if I had to, you know how like a counselor is like a counselor, but they have like a little narrow niche that's like, this is what I really kind of specialize in. Mm-hmm. But I'm, you know, hey, everybody, come on, I've got the tools to do this. Like, you know, pastoring, there are things I'm naturally good at, there are things I'm naturally bad at. But the thing that like is deep in my heart is helping young guys become real men, and I'm passionate about it. And it sucks.
You're gonna get beat up along the way a lot.
It sucks when guys are like, you know, making a comment like, you know, you're my spiritual father, man. You're changing my life, and then you know, a week later, they're like bad mouthing you behind your back. You know, I use the analogy. It's like, hey, you're like a dad. Now let me throw a rock in your face. You know, thankfully it doesn't happen constantly, but it's happened enough that it's terrible. It's terrible. And, you know, we've been doing this in Savannah now for 8 years, and, you know, a grown 30-year-old man wants to act like a fool. You know, you call him out, you move on. But when it's a 22-year-old, for me, it's like, come on, man. Somebody, especially if their dad isn't there dragging and fighting with them, you know, it's really a soft spot for me. And I don't know that's, and just to be fair, I'm not saying that that's from a position of like my dad not being there and fighting for me. My relationship with my dad was definitely strained through all of that. Me not being able to articulate because I could not see what was happening until I got to the other side of it. So I couldn't come home and go, guys, like I am, you know, I'm lonely in life. I have no friends, you know, I am picked on. I can't make the right decision, you know. I couldn't articulate that. So because in their eyes, I constantly stayed in this like edge of trouble. So that created this like tension, you know, that definitely strained my relationship with my parents, I think, for a really long time. And then the same way it was like, well, and this was probably wrong on my part, but like, you know, it's like, well, I should assume that because you're mom and dad, you know all the things. And so since you're reacting this way, you clearly are not doing things right. And because I couldn't communicate any differently, then I just put up a wall. And so, you know, I was happy to go to college and move away and not talk to them, you know, but as little as I had to for a long time.
Yeah, I'm thinking from that parent side of it, because I've got 4 boys, and if one of them was going through all of that, and you didn't really fully understand it until years later on, that would probably hurt them a lot, or whether it made them angry or made them sad. And it's like, why would you not tell us this? Or we could have helped you or done this for you, because you want to protect your kids. You've got kids too. It's like you want to do everything you can to not make all their decisions, but you want to make sure they are in a healthy, safe environment. And then when you find out they're not, like, that'll drive you crazy.
And I think that like my mom and dad both have their own stories about how they, you know, the things they went through that, you know, it's not my place to kind of be the one to dive into, but I think that they definitely felt like that they were doing the right thing. And then you pair that with like this is probably going to sound really mean and offend somebody, but this is exactly how I feel. You had the 90s had churches filled with pastors who, you know, ate at buffets and looked like they were the Goodyear blimp, and they condemned everything except for football and idolatry and, you know, gluttony. And so, you know, I grew up in that era of, you know, secular music is going to send you to hell. You know what I'm saying? So my mom and dad then going, oh man, we got to listen to what the church is saying. So nothing but Christian music. And then, you know, the Smurfs they're imparting, you know, demons onto your kids. They're latching on. So, you know, you can't watch the Smurfs or Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie or, you know, whatever it was, you know, most of those things are fads anyway, but, you know, they just come and go, and it was just always no. And they kind of stopped that when I turned 15, I think. And my mom was like, look, we're going to let you start making some decisions. But even up to that point, I remember being my youth pastor telling my mom and dad that my comic books were demonic. And he used the analogy that because my comics were in a bin under my bed, that it was like they were letting demons live under the place I slept. So, you know, what does any mom and dad do when they hear that? You know, it's like, oh, well, you got to get rid of all your comics. Yeah, this has got to go. This is evil. We don't want Satan around. And so I would say, you know, about as rebellious as I got, you know, was when I turned 16 and they weren't monitoring my music. I listened to, you know, Offspring, Stone Temple Pilots.
I was going to guess Pearl Jam. I was going to guess that.
Yeah, you know what? Pearl Jam was definitely the thing that was there, but their music was so slow. I'm not down on that. Like, I'm the same way with worship music today. It's like, come on, guys.
Pick
Like,
it up a little bit.
I don't. If heaven is about us laying around in diapers on clouds playing harps, I just don't want to be there. You know, I'm ready for a party. You know, so I'm telling our worship leader all the time. I'm like, come on. We got to do something. I need to jump. I need to, you know, I want to be at a, I want to say a rave, but I've actually never been to a rave, so I don't really know. But, you know, so, yeah, but, you know, I had some Pearl Jam CDs, but like.
Stone Temple Pilots. I love that, man.
Stone Temple Pilots. Bush was like, I'd listen to Machine Head, and I'd drive 60 miles an hour in a 20-mile zone, just like jamming to the music. And, yeah, just, that was probably about as, I guess I would say, off the rails as my life really ever got, outside of, I think I would say probably like entering into a porn addiction at one stage of life that was, you know, pretty crippling in my own emotions, and probably was very satisfying at the time as a result of the fact that I was so ostracized. So I had no community. So, you know, that, you know, opened the door for that.
A way to numb it and just deal with,
yeah,
get into a different world. Yeah.
So, but, you know, I don't think about it a ton. I do bring it up in stories, and there are some, you know, when I'm trying to, you know, talk with somebody or help make a point, but it's not like a regular part of my life. We're very blessed. I mean, we've had God do some really crazy stuff. I mean, you know, for us. And
yeah, I'd love to talk about a little part of that too, because you have a lot of things you can share, and we could talk for a long time, but love to hit on your family dynamic and your kids. And, you know, have they ever had to deal with even a small fraction of what you've had to deal with, whether it's bullying or just emotionally being made to feel some way or less than, or, you know, how do you communicate with your kids based on what you went through without overwhelming them, but also trying to guide them to, this is how you deal with these kind of things?
So ironically, when Carmen and I got married, we moved to Springfield, Missouri, went to Central Bible College, and I got a job teaching abstinence-based education in the public schools from a grant that had been provided by Bill Clinton, of all people. And
that's really fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. It was always great to kind of get up and be like, and this is thanks in part to a grant from our president, you know. But what we saw in there and the things we were hearing from kids, crazy stuff, like, you know, kids telling me like, this is stupid. My brother says if I use, you know, 3 condoms, I'll be fine. And I was like, what does that mean? 3 at one time? Yes. Then you beat the fail rate. And it's like, no, like that. Then you just make them, you know, it's like, you know, or a girl saying, you know, one girl told my wife that she thought she was pregnant. She was freaking out. Carmen was like, you know, like, what's going on? And she was like, my boyfriend snuck over to my house the other day, and okay. And, you know, what happened? Well, you know, he was throwing rocks at the window, and I opened up the window and we talked for an hour. And she was like, did he come inside? No, he just stayed down. I was on the 2nd floor. He couldn't get up. So we just talked through the window. And that's all that happened? Yes, but I think I'm pregnant. And Carmen was like, that's not how this works. Have you not been paying attention? And just, you know, and then having kids talk, well, my teacher says sex is a lot of fun, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, why is your teacher talking to you about that? You know? So then we started having a family, and we were like, we were really having a tough time with the idea of our kids being in public school, with that kind of being in there, hearing what kids were saying, and knowing how influence worked, and then my personal experience. So yeah, we made the decision from the get-go to homeschool. And so we've got a 17-year-old. He graduates this year and starts college next year. And he's been homeschooled his whole life. We've got a 13-year-old girl, and she is been homeschooled, and she dances. And then we've got a 10-year-old boy named Zoe, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. He's special needs. And then another boy named Ezra, who's 7. And I'm going to say this because it's like, it's, how parents can be kind of blind, thinking, oh, my kid's this or my kid's that.
Mm-hmm. No.
Right. Well, we're just really blown away at the caliber of our kids. And the only reason that we say that is, we have parents calling us all the time, hey, my kid's going through this, they're having a really hard time. And your kids just seem to deal with this stuff so well. Can so-and-so just come and play for an hour? Can they just hang out more with my kids? And this isn't like, oh, this happened once. This happens all the time.
It's got to make you feel good.
People, well, it's what I remind my wife when she's having those moments where
because she's home all day with them.
And I'm failing as a mom. And,
yeah,
the good thing about my job is I'm able to help a lot. So, it does work doing what we do. But yeah, they've been homeschooled. We gave them the option when they got to high school, if they wanted to go to high school, and there was a no-go. They were not interested in it. Isaac has been on 3 missions trips to Kenya, 1 to Mexico with me. He's climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with me, tallest freestanding mountain in the world. All of those things in the middle of school years. He's been a part of ministry. He's experienced things that so many kids who would not be able to do those things because of the school schedule. And he's doing his, math in a tent on the side of a mountain, and so it's been a real blessing. But that's why, the combination of what I experienced and probably just in some type of overprotectiveness, but then hearing the way that kids were talking when we were doing these classes, and we were like, I get it. There are so many awesome parents who raise such awesome kids through the public schools. And so it's not like it's not doable. It just, for us, it was just,
everybody's different.
For me, I couldn't go to bed at night not thinking about all of those things. Like I've said, the nightmares and stuff. So it's like,
well, you and I got connected kind of through the public school.
Yes, because we did have one.
Because your son Zoe was going to the elementary school that
correct
our boys were going to as well. So that's how we first kind of just started having conversations. And he's being homeschooled now.
He is, yeah.
And
first year
of being homeschooled. And I would love for you, man, we could do 3 hours on your son's story very easily.
Yeah.
But if you're able to just give the kind of 5 quick-minute version of Zoe's story of, because he's not even supposed to be here,
right,
which is incredible. So just somehow pack that in tight if you can.
I will.
We'll talk about
I'll just cover the highlights. So with Isaac and Caitlin, Carmen had a lot of Braxton Hicks contractions, false labor.
Right.
And so we'd been to the hospital a bunch. Doctors going, no, nothing's happening. Go back home. And that happened a lot with Isaac. So then with Caitlin, it's a little bit more guarded. With Zoe, it was like, it's like, it's probably false labor, And that happened one day, and it wasn't false labor. She was actually in labor. And when it got kind of critical for her, like, no, this isn't false labor. This is really happening. Of course, like we were in, kind of panic mode. And so the hospital where we were living at the time was like a 30-minute drive. So got her to the hospital, and there's a lot of medical terms around what happened, but the sac that Zoe was in internally had partially ruptured, and this had happened at some point before, and nobody knew. So he was born through an emergency C-section, and
how many weeks was it?
8 weeks premature.
Wow.
And the doctor came out and said that they had, her words were, we literally have every capable doctor in our hospital. It's a small country hospital, but we have every doctor in that room right now trying to keep him alive. And I couldn't see Carmen because of a C-section. I couldn't have been in the room at the time. Now you can, but they didn't allow that at the time, especially in an emergency scenario. So I was in prayer mode I actually told everybody in the room, I said, look, my baby's sick, might die. My wife just had an emergency C-section. I'm praying for God's favor, and I'm praying for miracles right now. And if you can't pray with me for that, I need you to leave. I love you. I'm glad you came. Go hang out in the lobby. I'll be right here. And like all but 2 people left the room because that was pretty intimidating, I guess. Man, I was just going to town. Jesus, right now, I need you. I need you to show up. And we ended up in Savannah. Doctor told us that he would not live. He had a condition called Hydrops Fetalis. His body was swelling to the point that blood vessels were bursting on his skin like spider webs. He was bleeding from his cuticles, bleeding from his ears. His retinas detached, and his eyes were just like jet black with blood filling his eyes.
Oh,
and
man.
It was tough. We would go in. We lived at the Ronald McDonald House, and so visitation happened in like every 3 or 4 hours for like 10 or 15 minutes. I don't remember the exact breakdown, but would go in there, and I would read this little Max Lucado kids book, You Are Special, to him, through the little incubator, sing praise and worship. And I'm a terrible singer, but that's what we did. We went in there and we sang, talked about Jesus, and then we'd go back to our room and pray. And we'd pray every night, God, you tell us we can come and ask for healing and believe for healing. However, we also know you're sovereign and you know things we don't know, so we trust you and we pray your will above all things. And that was a hard prayer. That was a prayer we prayed at night with tears in our eyes, It was a major trust exercise to end every night praying that. I know it might seem silly, but you prayed all day long for healing, standing and believing for healing, and then get down on your knees and say, okay, God, but your will's above all, and that's what we did. And we got brought to a room one day and by a doctor, and he said, every time you guys come in for visitation, it's kind of disruptive. And we were like, what does that mean? And he was like, well, the nurses are watching you guys because you come in and, most people who are religious, is the word he used, they're kind of crazy. And you guys are real calm and calculated, and, you have all their attention. They're wondering what you're doing. And he said, but, he said, I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian my whole life. And he said, I just don't think you're being realistic. And we just sat there listening. And he said, God does not heal the way that you're asking him to anymore. And he talked to me about his faith, and he tried to validate it, talking about the church he goes to here in Savannah. And but said, God doesn't move the way you're asking him to. And I was like, okay, well, we had come to the conclusion years before that, just like God would call someone to be a pastor, he's going to call someone to be doctors and lawyers, and, so we want to listen to their wisdom. And we said we appreciated it. But I had this weird moment in that room where I heard this audible voice tell me, Carmen and I wanted to plant a church already. So we had been looking all over the world, like, where would we go? We're going to plant a church, blah, blah, blah. And I heard this audible voice tell me, I'm calling you to Savannah. And I thought, man, that was weird. And I got up and walked out of that meeting with the doctor. And I was like, Carmen, I just had this weird thing happen in there. And she said, we're supposed to plant a church in Savannah. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, I just felt like the Holy Spirit told me that while we were sitting there. And I was like, that's exactly what just happened. So this was confirmation for us. And but it didn't change the prognosis for Zoe. Bleed on the brain. He wasn't passing albumin through his liver, so it was swelling. He had hydrops, and they told us, they wanted to take him off of a respirator that was keeping him alive. This was on a Friday. And I said, well, give us the weekend, and then can you do it on Monday? And I just thought, this, 2 more days to pray. And that Friday night kind of hit me, the story of Daniel and how Daniel had gone to the Lord looking for an answer. And it took 21 days. And when the angel showed up, the angel said, God sent me on the first day, but a war waged in the heavenly to prevent me from getting to you. And I thought, well, what if that's happening right now? What if what if God's bringing the answer, but there's a war that's waging that prevents that answer from coming, the resolve. And, there's no way for me to know. Again, I'm open to that. So Saturday night, we were staying at the Ronald McDonald House. I was put on some praise and worship in their family room, 3:00 in the morning. I'm all night praying, seeking God, believing. And I'm trying to be really short with this. This guy walks by and going to the laundry, 3 a.m, and he interrupts me. He's like, "What are you doing, Jim?" And we had met, known each other. And I was like, I felt frustrated, like, you're interrupting me, And I was like, "I'm praying they're going to take him off the respirator." Oh, this was Sunday night, not Saturday night, Sunday night. I said, "They're going to take him off the respirator in the morning." And he was like, "Okay," and walked on by. And he came back by and he said, "Hey, I need to ask you another question." I had my eyes closed and I was like, "What?" But I was really mad inside. And he was like, "We heard what the doctor said. There's no hope. Why are you doing this? You need to go sleep and be with your family." And I was like, "Listen, I have believed in a God that has the ability to change this situation my whole life. And if I don't fight this tonight and press through and give it everything I've got, then I don't know that I would be able to say in earnestly I ever believed." And he walked away again. And at that statement, I guess, I don't know, I thought, well, I guess that sounded dumb, but that's how I felt. He came back a minute later, interrupted me again. And this time I was about to tell him, like, "Dude, you need to go away." And he said, "I want what you have." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "I want to know this God." And I led this guy to the Lord right there Sunday night. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, how did this happen? I never even shared the gospel with this guy, and all of a sudden the Holy Spirit did all the heavy lifting. So I thought for sure Zoe was going to be healed in the morning, and we got a call from the doctor. Things were worse than before. And so we said, "All right, take him off the respirator." And my wife was holding him when that happened. That's the first time they let her hold him. And his eyes just opened up, and they were black as they could be, but it was like something happened. He just moved from this like kind of droopy state to like just moving his head. And she thought it was so odd. And they said that within a couple hours, he'll breathe his last breath. And 6 hours went by, and they were like, "Well, sometimes it takes a little longer. Y'all go get some sleep. And tomorrow, we'll do, we'll call you if anything happens." The next day, same thing, just breathing all day long on his own. Okay, well, any day now it's going to happen, And a couple of miracles happened I won't get into. Some of them are kind of private, but the crazy one was my wife went in to check on him, and they were like, "Hey, have you talked to the eye doctor?" And she said, "No." And they said, the nurses, and they were like, "Well, he was doing an eye exam on Zoe, and he just screamed and then ran out of here. And we thought it was crazy. And nobody knows what was going on."
The doctor screamed?
The doctor screamed and ran out of the NIC unit. And so we start calling and trying to get in touch with him. And he said, "Well, you won't believe this." And he said, "Both of your son's retinas are 85% reattached and his sight's restored." And, I don't know what that means, but I'm like, I believe it, And he was like, "No, you don't understand. Like there's no surgery to do this. And just one retina by chance reattaching is like, statistical impossibility. But for both of them to happen simultaneously," he's like, I went home to try to look up. He went back to the office to try to find if it's ever happened before, like he's like freaking out. And, the other doctor that's in charge of his liver, it doesn't matter. His liver's still shut down. It's not going to make a difference. 2 days later, healed. They said, "Well, none of that really matters because his brain's swelling and we can't put a shunt in. It's not operational, and he's just going to die. His brain's going to give out." And I said, "Well, you know what? We've seen all these miracles take place. We're not going to just let him die. Somebody's going to do this surgery. If this surgery is too risky for you, we'll move him to Atlanta where they'll do it." And the doctor said, No. Just give me 24 hours. Okay. And if anybody's going to do the surgery, I'm going to do it. I was like, somebody's going to do the surgery if it's needing. That's how I felt at the time. I'd gotten a lot more. And the next day he called me up and he was like, "Mr. Simpson, we can't do the surgery." And I was like, that is not going to work. I had made up my mind. Like if I had to go in there and, go all, what was it, Denzel Washington and grab my kid out of the hospital, I was going to do that, And he was like, "Because the bleeding is going away and it's all healing up, and there's no need for it. And then they told us, well, it won't matter. He'll be a vegetable the rest of his life, and you'll always have to feed him through a feeding tube. And they had a feeding tube put in. Gosh. So we took him home, and they told us, like, if it takes him more than 10 minutes to eat a bottle, he burns more calories than he consumes. So don't even waste your time. Just use the feeding tube. That's all he needs. So we used the feeding tube on the way home because it was such a long drive. And then to feed him, we pulled over on the side of the road and did that. And we got to the house. My wife tried to give him a bottle and he wouldn't take it. And the next morning she tried to give him a bottle and he wouldn't take it. So she went to do the feeding tube and his feeding tube fell out. And so I had run an errand. She calls me like freaking out. She's like, I can't walk away from him. So she literally had to take a cloth and hold it over the hole to keep stuff from just pouring out. Oh, man. It's gross. And she's like, I can't walk away from him. And she's like, you got to come home right now. So of course I came home. Well, in the process of that, we take him to the local hospital, and the guy is like, sticks the feeding tube back in and tapes it on. And he's like, leave the tape on for like a couple of weeks and then you can take it off. It should all be okay, which is not even how those things work. They have a balloon inside. That's what keeps them. He didn't even know what he was doing. It was so terrible.
It's like using duct tape or what?
Yeah, I was using surgical tape. Okay. It was terrible. But in the process of all of that, Zoe got hungry and started eating and never used that feeding tube again. They had to go and just have it surgically removed and closed up. And, jeez. We did our 21 days of fasting and praying back in end of August, beginning of September, and we decided this time for the first time, the whole family was going to do the Daniel fast. We talked with all the kids and said, do you want to do this? Because, previously it's just difficult with the little ones. Yeah, we're going to do it. Zoe sat there at one meal and ate 3 whole baked potatoes and then was like, what's next? More. I need more food. So they were off, and God just kept bringing miracle after miracle. And some doctors won't admit that. We obviously they're right, but we've had a number of doctors who have said, that it was a miracle. One guy said he had been a specialist for 40 years, and he was like, what happened is impossible. And it was a hand of God doing something. And eye doctor, same thing. He makes these jokes about the man upstairs listens to this boy's daddy. That's what he says. So he's not 100% healed. Zoe uses a walker. Part of his brain that is it functions differently. I don't want to say it's damaged because it's not like we see damage in there. It just functions differently. Is how quickly. So basically, if you ever met anybody who stutters, that if it weren't for Zoe not being able to walk without the assistance of a walker, you would just think Zoe, he stutters. But that's not exactly what's going on. It's the same thing. Also, another part of his brain that. You'll see kids that are autistic, and they'll do the head rock, and so he's not autistic. He's not on the spectrum at all, but for whatever reason, he has that when he's being creative in what he's telling you, his head rocks. And of course, people are like, what's he doing? Well, if he's being creative, so if he's
getting into it, man.
I mean, he's in it, man. And he's just like, and you can hear my voice trailing with the mic, but we'll be like, hey, use your superpower. That's our code word. And he knows that superpower is to be able to be creative and keep his head straight.
Wow.
So,
man, that's a lot to take in there, just even listening to it. And you've told me the longer version before, right, which is absolutely incredible. And I've got a couple questions as we slowly wind down here.
Sure.
And one of them is, you've got a special needs son who's survived just crazy, miraculous physical things that nobody can explain. Mm-hmm. And one, that's amazing. It's a miracle, but now he has a whole life to live where he's young now, kind of grade school age, but he's going to become an adult and, go through certain things. And, just your how you guys have processed that as parents, or you specifically as a father, mm-hmm, especially with your background of, man, I had to let my mom go when I was 6 and deal with that. And then I had to grow up with everybody looking at me differently and feeling neglected and left out and hurt. And now you have a son, mm-hmm, who you love very much, who is always going to be looked at differently, whether whether you like it or not.
No doubt.
And what he's going to go through, and how do you deal with all those things, and where's your heart and what he's going through, and how you're preparing him just for life. And it's not something I know of,
Yeah. My other kids they're pretty tough in the sense of like they don't let anybody mess with Zoe. They might mess with Zoe. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they might be annoyed by Zoe, but somebody else messes with Zoe, and it can go from 0 to 100 super fast.
Yeah, I get that.
Caitlin, we were at Tybee, and this kid, Zoe, was playing on the playground, and they have this side, so he's holding and walking down, and this other kid comes and is, standing there, and Zoe says, "Excuse me," and he makes some joke about how if the cripple can't get past, it's his fault. And it's like, I'm not moving. So it's a kid his own age picking on Zoe, and Caitlin was there, and she was like, "Hey, that feeling you get when you get knocked off of playground equipment?" And the kid was like, "What?" He goes, "No." And she goes, "Well, you're going to find out if you don't get out of this way." And I'm like, "Caitlin, like, calm down, bring it back. Yeah, it's really funny. You know what I'm saying? Like, she gets like, whew, she's like, no, nobody talks to him like that,
Yeah.
So
Wow.
he's surrounded with some defenders, that we have to, I'm sure you've heard your kids say stuff. You're like, maybe that's not the way to approach the situation.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely it. I think she pulled that out of a movie or something, we were joking about, but, yeah, he definitely gets it. I mean, he's overwhelmingly, the majority of people are even his age love him, and if they take any time to sit down with him, they find out like, he's into the same stuff I'm into. He's playing video games. He plays Battlefront and Call of Duty and, Minecraft, and he's, creative, and he draws, and, he loves storytelling, and, so yeah, I mean, he's not going to ever be running down the field. Well, I say ever. Today, he's not running down the field kicking a ball, and, but, he, more people are good to Zoe than not.
Good.
But there are kids sometimes, and it typically happens when we're in a public environment, that some kid will show their head, like that day at the playground, and he doesn't do life by himself right now. Some of the things that do weigh heavy on us is like, what will it look like when he's 50? He's a creative, passionate guy. I think if he will maintain the determination, I can see him stepping into a really good job. And, we don't have time to get into a lot of the things I really believe, but I believe that God has a call on his life, and I think he'll be a dad one day. And, but if none of those things do happen, and he, doesn't progress more, then, there's a burden that sits there on Carmen and I, knowing that the truth is one of our other siblings is probably going to be the only people in the world that will ultimately have the responsibility of it when we're gone, and I've had that conversation with my oldest. It's like, if in 40 or 50 years, your mom and I are gone and you're still here, you might be 70, but it's either going to be, if Zoe doesn't progress, if he were to stay, and we don't believe these things, but there's still good conversations, if, you're going to have to make the decision. Am I going to be the brother that brings him in and does the next season of life with him, or am I going to stick him in an institution? And, we don't want that for him,
Yeah, man. So last question, love to know how you've been through having to leave your biological mom. You've had to deal with bullying all throughout your kind of educational life, and now you have a special need child that you're taking care of, and all of these things come with difficulties, emotional difficulties, and time and energy, and they affect who you are and how you live your life. And so for anybody that's going through any one of those, what would your advice be, how they can make a an impact in their life, and just even in a simple way to help someone that's gone through and is going through the things that you are and have been going through?
Yeah, sure. A lot of the, a lot of times when we think about the obviously neglected people, a refugee, they're really honestly experiencing a lot of those same emotions, no doubt more amplified, not trying to create some comparison like, oh, that's what I was. But we have to remember that some of those emotions that put a person into a certain mental state or a certain, kind of like a place of existence, those things can happen in our backyard too. And so I think the biggest thing is for people to be aware, if you're a parent and you've got a kid who's getting in trouble at school, but at home they're obedient, doing their thing, you should be asking questions like, why is there a difference? There definitely can be rebellious kids, but more often than not, it's probably not the case. There's probably something else going on. There's some underlying reason why this is happening. And, bullying can definitely be a part of that. And not everybody is shaped and wired the same. So the way that I have dealt with it and responded to it in my life, and it's not the same way somebody else might. So somebody might be able to cope with it better than me. Somebody might cope with it worse than me. And if you don't take time as a parent to look into that and see what's going on, you really run the risk of some long-term pain in their lives. So being proactive is really important. And then that just should be the case for adults in general. Be slow to reprimand and correct and quick to teach. The difference between telling a kid, don't do that, and hey, you don't need to do that, and here's why. It's a night and day difference. And today's generation can get the answer to the questions they want very easily, to the questions they have very easily. It's not like, probably even 20 years ago, they just pull out their phone and they ask, Google or Siri, why is this like this? And they're going to get an answer. More than ever, I think they need us being a voice of truth. And so don't be afraid to take teaching moments with young people. And so if you see them bullying or you see them being the ones creating a neglected person, invest in them. They deserve that because they have a future as well. And then make sure that we're advocates for those who are hurting. And then if you are the person who's being bullied, whether you're a child listening to this or you're an adult, because I think it can happen at all ages, learn how to communicate that, learn how to have a voice, and learn how to draw boundaries. As a kid, that's a lot more difficult because you're not given the tools sometimes or the permission to draw some boundaries. And so all the more reason to be talking to people who will listen. If mom and dad are not, active in life and ready to sit down and have a conversation, who is? Maybe you have a teacher, a pastor, somebody who will listen to what you're saying and help. Because you're not just advocating for today, you're advocating for your tomorrow, because these things have long-lasting consequences. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the most important thing, and it's what we try to do, not just as parents for our kids, but just as leaders in our community is, not just, telling a kid no, but trying to help to educate, and being really fair and transparent in that way. So I think that's where it's got to start. We got to be the ones. We talk all day long about the solutions, like I said, and come up with big plans and write workbooks. But if we don't actually go in there and have to sit down and do the work, it's not gonna actually change. So yeah.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate you being here, being our guest today. And how can people find you? Email?
Yeah, email. We do Facebook, Instagram, but if you get on there, and Quinn can drop links to all that in the descriptions. But I use those primarily as portals to share what's happening in my family's life. That's probably 90% of what goes on. I don't have a good habit of checking Facebook Messenger and stuff. The best way is just through email, jim@citychurch.life. That'll be available as well. But be happy to do anything I can to help anybody. And thank you for all you do, Nick, you and your family. not just coming in and doing a podcast, but you actually are boots on the ground and helping these young men in Chatham County and the surrounding counties. And I know you have a heart beyond that. And then you go home and your whole family applies that with fostering and investing in young people. So the world needs more people with like you, who not only have a voice but also have a shovel in the other hand. So
I like that, a microphone and a shovel. There you go.
That's what
While
we need.
listening at the same time.
That's what we got to do. So
Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for opening up your church, your building, for us to be able to do this. Quinn, thank you for producing. And yeah, man, hit me up at Schultzy Time, and our email is info@theneglected.org. And,
Sweet.
We'll catch you later. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Quinn. Thank you, City Church, and catch everybody later. Peace out.